Field Trips features real field stories told by real ASCE members. This episode of Field Trips is sponsored by the ISFOG 2020 conference. More info at isfog2020.org.
I'm Stan Caldwell, and this is my field trip. I have selected an event that occurred long, long ago and far, far away. Specifically, in January 1973, about 4,000 miles northwest of where I am now, in the Arctic Ocean off the north coast of Alaska. I was 2 years past my master's degree and celebrating my second anniversary as a structural engineering specialist with Atlantic Richfield Company, better known as ARCO at that point in time. ARCO was the company that discovered and was developing the Prudhoe Bay oil field along the north coast of Alaska. With an estimated reserves of 25 billion barrels of oil, it was then and is now the largest reservoir ever discovered in North America. Consequently, much of my first 2 years were spent on projects there. This time, I received an unusual assignment. ARCO had an offshore exploration lease that they would forfeit if they did not drill it by a certain date. The question was how to do so within the prevailing environmental rules. There was a gravel spit 5 miles offshore in the Arctic Ocean called Gull Island. You can find it on Google Earth, even today. Gull Island was shaped like a boomerang, about 2,000 feet long, perhaps 20 feet wide, 200 feet wide at its widest point, and no more than a foot or two above sea level at any point. ARCO figured that maybe they could drive sheet piling along the perimeter of the island and backfill it with gravel to create an adequate drilling pad. The big question was, can sheet piling be driven into permafrost without scrolling or interlock failures? And there was more than 2,000 feet vertically of permafrost at Prudhoe Bay. Now, my assignment was to answer those questions. I led a research project to drive a dozen interlocking steel sheet piles at Gull Island. Working in the Arctic in winter is unique. First of all, it is pitch dark 24/7 from mid-November to mid-February. Beyond that, the temperatures range from highs of minus 40 below zero to lows of minus 60 below zero, and that's on the thermometer without wind chill. Wind chills have been recorded there as low as minus 96 degrees below zero. Therefore, all employees from the lower 48 were required to stop in Anchorage at the ARCO headquarters to be issued official Arctic gear from the ARCO quartermaster before proceeding the final 630 miles north to Prudhoe Bay. Upon arrival at the base camp, I drove to the offshore site each day in my ARCO pickup truck. A bulldozer would scrape the snow off the ocean ice on a path that was curvilinear, about 8 miles long, to provide a somewhat smoother ride. My equipment at Gull Island included a crane, a Delmag D12 diesel pile driver, several barrels of diesel, which were in the back of my pickup truck. It soon became obvious that the diesel would not ignite in the hammer at such low temperatures. There was a plant called a crude oil topping plant at the base camp that produced a very low-grade synthetic gasoline for the pickup trucks that they called naphtha. So I had several barrels of naphtha hauled to the site. Well, it didn't ignite either. Now, it was at about that time when the other engineer who was helping me, he was a fellow named Dick. He was well named. He was out of the Anchorage office. He was a drilling engineer with a real disdain for all of the experts that kept flying in and out from Dallas. Well, one afternoon at 5 o'clock sharp, Dick proclaimed that it was Wednesday, and therefore it was steak night, all you can eat, back at the base camp. And with that, he took off in his pickup truck, not on the ice road, but as the crow flies over the mounds of snow. And the crane operator followed him, leaving me by myself in the ocean with the barrels of diesel in the bed of my truck. What to do? Do I take the safe route, the ice road, or do I follow the taillights? I chose to follow the taillights. I noticed at one point as they neared the dock, it seemed like the truck slowed down and then jumped. When I got to that spot, I discovered a lead had opened up in the ocean ice, and my truck sank right in and settled on the bottom of the ocean floor. Fortunately, I was close enough to the shoreline that the water depth at that location was about 4 feet. But there I sat in 4 feet of water, almost to my windows, and the water was refreezing instantly all around me. Not a good feeling at all. So I reverted to my Wisconsin upbringing, put the truck in four-wheel drive low, and started rocking back and forth, back and forth. And after about 15 minutes of that, which if nothing else kept the lead open, I was able to catch enough of a grip that I could drive up and onto the surface of the ice. I wasn't going to die after all. But then I did something really stupid. There was a spotlight on top of the cab. I rotated it 180 degrees to look behind me at the spot that I had just departed, and it was big enough you could have buried 2 or 3 elephants easily. Then I did something even more stupid. I got out, found a straight handle, 6-foot-long shovel in the bed of my truck, went to the edge of the opening and started lowering the shovel to try and gauge how deep the water was. By the time I got to the bottom and retrieved the shovel, there was only about a foot left of the handle. The shovel had gathered about a 6-inch annulus of ice all the way around. I could barely lift it. Then I discovered how close I had come to a real problem. Okay. Then I looked back at my truck and discovered I had now had a low rider. That truck had 6 inches of ice all the way around it, up to the windows. Again, 4 feet. So I threw the shovel in the back of the truck and drove my lowrider back to the base camp, went straight to the mechanic shop and announced that I had just ruined another one of their trucks. But at least I'd be issued another truck the next day and would no longer have the barrels of diesel burdening me. We had no use for the diesel or the naphtha by that point in time. Back to the main story at Gull Island. It was then that somebody found an aerosol can of ether, better known as carburetor starter fluid, rolling around the floor of their truck. I climbed up the trestle, squirted the ether as the hammer dropped, and by golly, it ignited. We tried it a few more times. It ignited again, as long as we had our timing down. After making some quick calculations, I ordered an entire C-130 Hercules cargo plane filled with crates of ether spray cans. Even as a young engineer at ARCO, I knew that results mattered more than the budget. When the ether arrived at Gull Island, I and Dick took turns climbing up the trestle and squirting ether for each blow of the hammer. We face two dangers. First, steel becomes brittle at such low temperatures. We were very fortunate that none of the steel shattered. Second, from time to time, our mittens would occasionally burst into flames. Note that I say mittens. ARCO did not allow gloves because they would not protect your hands. We were required to wear company-issued mittens with liners. Well, when those mittens would burst into flames, we would jump off the trestle down to the ground and put the flames out in the snow, and then climb back up and continue doing what we were doing. After several days of this drudgery, we were able to successfully drive a dozen sheet piles. The next step was to use a steam line to extract, examine, and document the condition of each pile. I missed that part of the research. One night I got back to the base camp and found that both of my feet were frozen past my ankles up to my shins. The ARCO quartermaster in Anchorage had accidentally issued me safety boots with steel toes, essentially heat sinks. My feet didn't stand a chance. When the resident paramedics examined me, I admitted that I had frozen my feet once previously while snow skiing at 32 below zero in the upper peninsula of Michigan while in high school. On that occasion, it took about 3 days before feeling returned to my feet and my toes. This time I was told that it would not return. I would not be that lucky. They solemnly stated that they were shipping me out on the very next flight south, and I could look forward to a double amputation upon my arrival in Dallas. Instead, I resolved not to go anywhere near a doctor or a hospital in Dallas. After several months of hobbling around the office and my house, the feeling finally returned. Today, almost 50 years later, I am pleased to announce that I still have 2 working feet and 10 working toes. Now, in my absence, the piles were extracted and found to be in pretty good shape. ARCO subsequently converted Gull Island into a drilling pad. In 1976, they drilled the first of 3 exploratory wells. The next year, they drilled a second. Both of those wells found oil, but not in sufficient quantity to warrant development. Several years later, they drilled a 3rd hole. It was a dry hole. I hope that you enjoyed my field trip.
Field Trips is a production of ASCE and the Geo-Institute.